Hello and welcome back to the Single Malt Review for part 2 of our past versus present. Present versus past. Terminator 2, the whiskey edition. Brought to you by Whiskey Hero Heine. Thank you very much for gifting your recycled birthday tasting onto us and thus the world. Doing God's work there. So, what we had first was Longmorn. What we have now is something possibly and even a little bit more extreme. We have Glen Elgin, not a whiskey we had any great knowledge of coming into it, and a whiskey we still do not have any great knowledge going in a second time. But going a second time we are going to. Yes. But as the keen-eyed of you may have spotted already, this one's going to be a wee bit exciting just because of the history of it. Because the older box has a bit of a name that the older drinkers may recognise. White Horse. Glen Elgin brought to you by the White Horse people. And that's a name, though they've brought the modern day owners, Diageo, have brought White Horse back internationally. I don't think you can get it in Scotland anymore, but you can get White Horse in New Zealand, which is bizarre. But the real White Horse, the previous White Horse, was a very, very, very historic blended whiskey, and this was one of its principal malts, and it bears that lineage in the packaging. White Horse Distillers wasn't a concern for quite a while. That got sucked into the ever thirsty whiskey black hole that is Diageo, and entered the fold some time ago, and they sort of annihilated White Horse as a separate entity in around 2010. But bottles like this are significantly older. This is definitely in the 90s once again here. The exact date very, very difficult, because if there's one thing that has a poorly documented history, it's the White Horse Company. For whatever reason, people were too busy drinking it to write anything down. So anyway, I've been there. Can relate. So what we are going to do is taste it against the modern day version of Glen Elgin, which is brought to you a lot more directly from Diageo. And it's not the only difference either, as we only recently discovered, slightly blind today. That one is conspicuously 12 years old. This one is conspicuously zip.
No age statement.
There's no age statement, not on the box, not on the bottle, which is itself interesting in that it has clearly destined for the Japanese market, but either it came back or never made it in the first place. It was usurped by pirates on the way. I quite like the bottle. It's got this sort of smoked glass.
It's an
thing
elegant presentation.
It's very, very nice, and it's otherwise quite modern. This could be a bottle of Glenfarclas in the modern day.
And it's, pleasingly, 43% ABV, quite a modern bottling streak compared to the more common 40% of the era.
And as for the actual age, even though it doesn't display it on the bottle, I'll bet it's not far off 12. I'll bet it's floating around 10 there. Who knows what they've used in it, but we'll just let the taste buds do the work there, and we'll have a wee squiz. So, I haven't destroyed any corks yet, which is good. Right. Because that's the one thing that tends to fail in old bottles. The whiskey will be fine, but you'll leave half the cork in there half the time you open a real old one. So, and again, we have no telemetry on chill filtration or colouring, which is a shame, but we'll just have to do our own work there, at least on the chill filtration. That looks pretty jolly similar to me. I'd say colour-wise, they have either maintained it in terms of batch consistency or in terms of exactly the right E140 whatever that got tapped in. So we'll see what wins out on the day there. But looking pretty consistent colour-wise. So, what's the difference? Okay, all right.
As we found for Longmorn, there is a hint of sort of a dustier, older smell to the older whiskey. The new one has a clearer, fresher.
That's probably note. A bit of bottle age. People call them dusties, not strictly because of there is an actual aroma and taste of dust. It's more that they're all dusty bottles, but you can't help but translate that psychosomatically through to getting a little bit of there's an antique note on these old bottles, and that is bottle age.
Jute, a little bit of Hessian sack.
Certainly by no means the dominant aroma, but it is there, and we should be conscious of it.
Fruity,
still
juicy,
good,
honeyed.
still good. Not my favourite of the lineup of the ones we did blind, but a perfectly respectable Speyside whiskey with lots and lots of good keen fruit coming through, and quite a good, quite a vivacious sort of twang on that flavour.
Now on to the
And
old.
the old one, that smells very different to me. That smells.
Ooh. Oh wow!
It smells softer.
That is lemony. That is one of the most sharply citrus whiskies I've had in a while.
Yeah, that's got kind of a bounce.
Yeah.
It's got a
Bit zesty.
mineral constituent too. There's asphalt. There's asphalt on here, fresh or possibly just gotten very hot in the sun. There's a real
hint of petrichor almost.
flinty, stony. Yeah, interesting. And I wonder. And again, I'd have to go back and really, really dig to find out. But I wonder if that's direct-fired stills versus more modern gas-fired or steam, which is the most modern iteration and the one that conveys the least to the spirit, because it literally conveys nothing.
Oh,
interesting.
Adding a skerrick of water has
I think
really
the
brought
skerrick
out.
of water might be necessary.
It has unleashed just a flinty, minerally torrent. It is such a clear and powerful mineral water sort of chemical note, but in the best possible way.
That's really quite strange. The difference here,
Oh, I like it.
and I a bit called it, and that the Longbourn was, I think they've really maintained a through line in the Longbourn. This is very, very different.
Yeah, it's a whole different beast. There's the modern one has all about honey and fruit. The classic is much more focused on a drier minerality, a cleaner palate.
If anything, if I can be slightly unkind towards the modern Glen Elgin, it's a bit ordinary. Like, it's very. I talk about whiskey-flavoured whiskey, and this is one of them. It's on that spectrum. It's it's pretty whiskey-flavoured.
It's certainly following the fashions more, yeah.
Yeah, slightly stayed. This one, the OG, the 90s model, age statement unknown despite, that's a proper weirdo whiskey, and I think to its benefit. That's really quite strange. Yeah, Dave is quite right with people talk about earthy whiskies. This is not earthy whiskey. No. You have to dig a lot deeper. This is
gravelly and stony.
Mine whiskey. This is quarry whiskey. This is
carved out of marble and granite
in a way that is really, really quite interesting. And I'm trying to think where you would get that, because it's not from the wood. It's not from the wood, and it's not classically from the barley.
Perhaps just more older, more used casks imparting less character over time.
Possibly, and the maltings may have moved as well.
Could it even just be sheer passage of time? This whiskey is exposed to sunlight, to air, other outside influences over the decades.
It doesn't taste like all bottle aged to me. I think it's coming from somewhere else, but I'm not enough of a guru to really accurately say what it is without really.
It's a culmination of all the different influences that made this a whole different beastie.
I think it's production, but whole different beastie is correct. This is. I would not have picked this if we'd done pin the tail on the historical bottle of whiskey, which is my favourite party game. I would have ballsed this up because this one is probably closer to the older Longbourn than it is to this one. If you get my reasoning here, it's very, very, very different. And what I thought has come true. I like the old one way more. We've never, to my knowledge, scored a Glen Elgin, but this older one, this would only get an 86 from me, which is a strong score, but it just doesn't have a lot of individuality to boost it higher. The new one, though...
Wait, when you say the new one...
Oh, wait, rather, no. When I say the new one, I'm talking...
One we're tasting more
I'm talking out my behind. The one I am holding in my hand, which is in fact the old one.
But newer to us in the sense that we're tasting it more recently.
Yeah. The new old one.
What is time anyway?
That's something else. That has such an individual character and has such a dynamism to its flavour. It is different. In addition to being good, they're both good whiskies. This one's good and it's unique. It's got real individual character to it. I really like it. That's an 88. It has gone up. So that's interesting. That's quite interesting. What do you think?
Cool. at the risk of sounding like a fence sitter, I like them both just as much, only in different ways. The new one has the sweetness and the fruit that I enjoy. The old one has an idiosyncratic character that's all its own, which I also really enjoy. They're brilliant as a kind of time capsule then versus now comparison of the one whiskey, and I would rate them both square 89.
Ooh, okay, all right. So Dave has met the opposing forces right in the middle. That's
I can't pick a favourite. They're sufficiently distinct that they're both kind of synergize into this wonderful, just vertical tasting almost. This comparison, this time capsule of one distillery. It's great. Yeah.
No, it's the older one for me. There's just more individuality going on. So anyway, catch us next time for number 3 when we're going to be looking at Highland Park. And that, I think, that's going to be a real curveball.
Yeah.
As different as this one was, I think Highland Park's got some wackiness in store, because that is a whiskey that has changed significantly over the years. So let's dig in and find out what's good. Slanger, we'll see you back.